Come on. You gotta be kidding me. Welcome to the Zachrilege cast. Fitzgerald, you are back on the show.
Woohoo!
After 4 years. What the heck is wrong with me?
4 years.
Well,
it blows my mind it's been 4 years. Even though time and space have lost all meaning in the last few years. Still, yeah.
That's true. Well, first of all, why do you hate God? I'm sorry, my questions got mixed up. Apologetic show is tomorrow. See, the perfect thing about this setup is that I just rewatched, our chat from 4 years ago. It was like August of 2017.
Yeah.
And at the very end of the show, you were talking about a sci-fi series you had that was about to come out. And now that series has concluded.
Woohoo! All 3 books. Yep.
And so it's probably a good time to talk about them all. I think when we initially talked, the last book was coming out in April, came out in June, but it's out now for
It's out now, all 3
Once
books.
It's out, it's like, hey, it's out, people. Get your muddy paws all over it. But before we get into the show, where are you now? Because the last time we talked, I believe you were living like in the San Francisco area.
Yeah, in San Francisco itself. And then early last year, our rent went up to $4,100 a month. And we said, well, I guess we're not going to live the rest of our lives in San Francisco. And that was the downside. The upside was that we found a place in Humboldt County in Eureka, 5 hours north of San Francisco. This old Victorian house that turned out we could own outright for less than we were paying for rent in San Francisco, even before the rent went up. So it was it's been quite a roller coaster ride the last couple of years.
And where, in comparison to your location, are the wildfires that are going on?
Wildfires, they are up east of us, about an hour and a half east of us. So, but the funny thing is, all the smoke's been blowing to the east, so you wouldn't even know there was fires happening here for most of the time. This week it's been a little smokiness in the air, but really that's the first time I've noticed since this whole season began of fires. We've really been lucky.
And how's the feeling in California with the recall election coming up? I think it's September 14th.
September 14th coming up. And if you are listening and you are a California voter, get your vote in now. If you're mailing in, do it before the 7th. But yeah, we do not. The last thing we need is to get an anti-vaxxer, anti-masker governor in the office right now. I can't imagine a worse disaster for California.
Yeah, it's I'm a little surprised that our governor here in Georgia hasn't been more anti-mask. He's just been I'm not going to do a mandate. That's it. He's not been quite as openly evil as the people in Florida and Texas. And I showed this to you before the show, but we'll do it again. So tonight, I got the shirt. So I got the beverage, Dragon's Milk, and then of course the vanilla.
Nice.
Sometimes, they do these weird reserves and they kind of are funky.
They had a oatmeal cookie one a few years back that was amazingly scrumptious.
I have the oatmeal cookie glass.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Boy, you're making me jealous.
I am representing a bit too much, probably. But okay, so I used to do the out of context thing. Let's just use a couple of lines from the trilogy.
Okay.
And I'm sure you'll remember them. No, I will absorb them. That could be like you when you talk to Jesus historicity people. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a line from book 3. That's Sinsamaya talking about destroying the Ouroboros that's psychically destroying the whole planet. Yeah. Which is
So who's doing that now? No, we could use one of those, and then the other one is he looks like Chewbacca with rabies.
Yeah, that is. I think that's Amber describing Porter Rockwell, the one of the bad guys and a famous Mormon figure from real life, from real history. And I stand by that description, by the way. If you've seen the picture of him, he's just got these bright blue pit bull eyes, like a zombie from a 70s Italian movie or something.
Yeah, it's good to talk to kind of bring that up because, in these books you have, of course, the characters that you create, and then you have some real, historical figures. You kind of told the story at the end of the last time we talked, but it's been a little while for people.
Yeah.
Everybody has it memorized, but what was the whole genesis of the idea behind, not only a book, but writing a trilogy?
Right.
Since you've done a trilogy before, you did the, Mything in Action, which just kind of was like one, well, I guess a trilogy could theoretically be one long book, but,
True.
And you started with the idea of a trilogy, right, for this?
Exactly. With Mything in Action, I wrote a huge book and then realized it had to be 3 books just for logistics of printing and doing the audiobook. It was funny when I was talking to my sound engineer and he was just going through the motions. I said, this is going to be kind of a bigger book than usual the other ones were. And he says, oh, what's the word count? I said, 250,000 words. And he says, oh, what's the page count? And I gave him the page count. He said, well, is that 8.5 or 11 by 8 or is that 6 by 9? It was like, oh yes, books are smaller than the pages on your computer. And that's when we realized we were about 900 pages in. And my nice one book turned into 3, not so huge books. But the funny thing is, they're super fast reads. For pushing 1,000 pages, they just fly by. At least it seems to be my experience and the experience that people tell me that they're super readable.
I definitely agree. Been through them both. I've had some authors on, but that's the first guest I've had on who's written multiple trilogies, I think, or at least talked about multiple trilogies.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I just wanted to hear about the initial idea and how you pitched it, and then how you got yourself a co-author.
Right. Well, it's funny. The idea for the Time Shards trilogy came from a role-playing game that I was doing in college, or at least had the idea of doing in college. And a couple of years back, well, this is quite a few years back, actually, we were coming home from Comic-Con, and my wife and I were driving home, and we just were chatting, and I was telling her the idea I had for this role-playing game, where basically the timeline shatters, and so the characters can be from any time, any place, and you don't know if you're going to bump into a knight in shining armor or a robot or a saber-toothed tiger. It's just kind of
or a cat,
yeah. And it was just a little free-for-all and a very fun idea. And as I was telling her this, her eyes just got bigger and bigger, and she said, "Oh, Dave, we got to make a novel out of this." And so as soon as we got home, we pitched it to her agent at Titan, and they snapped it right up, the whole idea for a trilogy. And it could not have been an easier submission. I was really excited about that. And then all we could do is write it and think up everything in it. So
yeah, I didn't even realize that. So the Expanse books, I think that initially was a role-playing game.
That one surprised me.
And it's 2 authors who write under a pseudonym. There's only one name, but they're 2 authors.
Right.
So they kind of do the 2 things. And that's one of the parts that kind of amazed me. First of all, having a co-writer, first of all, being married to your co-writer.
Yeah.
How were you able to, divvy up the work and then, organizing it, and just, I would assume this is a very large whiteboard you're dealing with, in terms of, it's all the plots and the characters, and then what are going to clash?
We had a really firm idea of the loose plot, the arc of all 3 books at the very beginning. We knew it was going to start here, this was going to happen, this was going to happen, and it would end this way. And the rest of it was all walks on the beach, lots of walks on the beach, hammering out plot points. But as far as the actual nuts and bolts of doing the writing, for book 1, Dana, my wife, took one of the characters and I took the other main character and ran with that. And then we would, once we'd done a chapter or 2, we'd throw it back to the other person and they'd put their go through it and put their 2 cents on it, and we'd hammer it out that way. And I went into the project being a little nervous because we've written things before, but it's always been something that's like I'm helping her do a project for her thing. So I had no ego involved in it at all. This was the first time that it was the other way around. This was like my baby, my thought, and we were all playing in my sandbox for a change. And I was very nervous because I was super possessive, and like as a historian, I wanted to make sure the history was like dead on, and it worked out fine. It worked out fantastic, and she brought ideas to the story that I never would have even thought of, and I was just really, really could not ask for a better experience writing it. Yeah. That's a very long story, very short, but yeah.
What was it like, I guess, coming up with kind of a lot of the main characters and having them connect? You get a first century kind of pre-Scottish guy, someone from Victorian England. You have a 1940s British soldier, kind of a Comic-Con attendee,
cosplay girl. Yeah. It was funny because in the first book, the 2 main characters don't have any languages in common. They don't speak the same language. They do a smattering of Latin and Harry Potter spells, and that's how they manage to communicate besides sign language, basically. That was super fun, and it was just kind of I wouldn't say wish fulfillment exactly, but one rule that we put in it was that so you got the timeline shattered, so you could literally bump into something from any single time. That's no problem. Within, I guess it was 600 million years is what we established. But one rule we did keep was that we made it geographically tied. So if you're in book 1, England, you're not going to run into samurais. You're not going to run into Amazon tribesmen. So that was the one thing we kept, just to put some corners on things so it wouldn't get too super crazy. And as it is, over the course of the book, they go all over the place, and we wind up seeing all kinds of different things. So that was fun. But we had some kind of archetypes, and it was mostly sticking with people who could be in Great Britain, this part of Great Britain, at the right time. So, for instance, some of our American characters are there, our historical characters. Like, I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but we would track down where certain people were at certain parts of their lives. It's like, bingo, she was at crossing the English Channel. Then that's when we're going to bring her in the story, and that worked out really well. And the fun / crazy making part of the book is that, I've done nonfiction books, I've done fiction books, and normally I like to switch from one to the other because the process is very different. With a nonfiction book, you have to document everything. You have to have footnotes, you have to have citations, you have to make sure all your ducks are lined up. With fiction, you don't need any of that. You just have to make it all up. Well, for this book, we had to both make it all up and do all the research for the history to make sure it lined up. And it was like on every single page, there was some question, a historical question to be researched. And I mean, I love that kind of stuff. I love doing historical research, so that was super fun. But boy, was it a lot of work. I don't think I've ever written anything so complex as far as having to use your imagination and your historical chops to the same degree. It was very fun, and I think people really appreciate it because what I love hearing from people is the ones that say, "Wow, it feels like we're really there the way you described this place and this time," and that's what we want to hear.
I think one thing you did well in the trilogy, and man, it would be interesting to get the version with footnotes, like the Jesus mything in action with all the footnotes, because you probably have a version of that somewhere. But you didn't just like, hey, I'm establishing these 8 main characters and these 12 main locations, and then all 3 books we got that. Every single book you're layering in more locations and more characters, and we're traveling basically. I think you go to every continent in the world. It's like the show Amazing Race, but with times as well.
Yeah.
Was that a tough one? I guess, I don't know, in terms of like selling, but the fact that it's kind of sci-fi, but it has time travel, and then it kind of has a alternate history kind of aspect to it as well, with the different versions of characters.
Exactly. Yeah. As the books progress, things get weirder and weirder, and towards the end, it all makes sense. But there's some moments where it's like, okay, what the hell just happened? What is this going on? And when we start seeing the same character over and over, only it's not the same character, or when one of our characters goes down a rabbit hole basically and has a very weird experience with this, kind of lava lamp gone, lightning field kind of experience. And we don't get an explanation in the first book for any of that. And as we get, further down the trilogy, it all starts to come together. But the main overarching quest of the book is one day, all these characters from all these different times, the timeline shatters and they find themselves basically in a post-apocalyptic world. But this world is made up of like jigsaw pieces, where this came from 5 million BC, this came from 1776, this came from some year in the future. And they are thrown together, they come together, and they soon realize that not only has the world been turned topsy-turvy, but it's going to be destroyed if they don't do something. And it's that quest to save the world, while at the same time they're getting to know this brand new post-apocalyptic world, what I call schizochronolinear. It's a broken timeline world. And
you could really clean up and Scrabble at that one. That's like the whole thing, all the way across. 25-letter word. Hey, boom, you're done, people.
Yeah. But I think that's the best word to describe the genre of this particular. It's not a time travel book. It's not a post-apocalyptic book, but it is a time travel post-apocalyptic book. It's a broken timeline book. And a lot of fun characters, a lot of fun places they go to. And it was fun using the geographical anchoring worked on so many levels, because once they go to a certain place, then we'd have to research what happened in that time. So what could they conceivably run into? And some of the places they go are really interesting, and they're kind of not widely known except to history buffs. But it's amazing how many different things you could find in any given part of the world, especially where our characters go to. And that was super fun, being able to like shine a light on things like from Northern Africa or things from Asia that a lot of people don't know about, and yet they're historically accurate, historically real. It's a fun playground to be in.
And this isn't really a spoiler, but they do end up in the Garden of Eden, but you have to figure out what that actually means in context of the book. And when you find that out as someone, I don't know, there's almost like a little bit of Easter eggs from your book history, a little bit in there with some of the real. Well, let's do this. So you have a little bit of like future technology, because there's some characters from like the 23rd century.
Right.
What was it like for you to create like a character that was kind of a ship, AI, and how it like interacted with the characters?
That was super fun. I kind of wanted to. It's funny because there's different. It's not just the past that got shattered in this trilogy. It's also the future in a sense, because we've got these multiple competing futures going on, and so there's a future where one character comes from, where the 23rd century is post-global warming. So there's that, but it talks about things like, he had a poster of the romantic nightlife on the canals of New York, that kind of thing. Whereas another character from another 23rd century his world is just the worst you can possibly imagine. All the trends that we're afraid of now, let's say they all go through, and that's where he comes from. And then there's another one that comes from, not really better or worse, but just very, very different, and involves lots of. There's so many spoilers I don't want to give, but there's some very different. Tough. Yeah, some very different futures in there, and it was fun to work out all of them. The main future, our future, if you will. I wanted to make sure it was kind of on track with, all the trends that we have technologically now. If this goes on, and so nobody really carries anything. It's all either implanted in their bodies or their brains, or it's 3D printed instantly, basically for them, on demand. And the ship has a lot to do with that. It's got an interesting, motile structure to it, and the character was fun too, of the AI running the ship.
Yeah, that's the hard thing about science fiction. Even when someone wrote it 20 years ago, it can seem really out of date. I just finished the Arthur C. Clarke, the Rama series.
Yeah,
and he has people in the 22nd century reading newspapers, newspapers, and people smoke about as much as they did in 1982.
Yeah.
And it's well, how can you predict a lot of that? He still had digital technology before people even really knew what the internet was, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it's there are going to be hits and misses when you do that in the future. You're wouldn't the world 200 years from now just be, you would go insane in 10 seconds, probably.
Probably so. Yeah. And I for all
you didn't go that far. You go 150, 200,
Yeah. 23rd century. But I wanted to make sure it felt different enough, and from our time, because that's always been, as a historical person, that's always my pet peeve, is when they have somebody from ancient Rome and they talked like they're from San Dimas. They modern sensibilities, they have modern thoughts, and the language sounds modern. I always hated that. Remember the old Hercules show with Kevin Sorbo? That kind of stuff bugs the crap out of me. But we put a lot of work into having the characters, the differences in the characters, both their strength and their weakness, and to make them not think like 21st century Americans, except for the 21st century Americans. But I wanted to make sure the Victorians had that Victorian sensibility. I wanted to make sure the Celts had that, our Celtic hero didn't see the world the way we do. And it was fun seeing how you'd throw these characters into a situation, and sometimes the ancient ones would do better than the modern ones, just because they're used to life being weird. They're used to magic and mythology and thinking that's a real thing. So when all these weird things are happening, they just, that's just the way, life is, where the modern characters were really flummoxed by it.
I think that was what done really well, is that it wasn't hey, the more modern people had the answers all the time. It was
right.
And it wasn't hey, the people from 1 BC had all this great knowledge that we've lost now. It's at certain times, different characters had the answers. So if people, fans of your show or fans of your books, kind of done the shipping, they've been trying to force relationships, don't you think Blake and Harcourt, maybe there's something going on there? The Victorian, that will not spoil anything, I hope. The Victorian British guy, and then the guy from the World War II. They were both British, I think. So at least they had that.
Yep, they have that in common. Well, there is some romantic interests that come to fruition in book 3. And again, I don't want to spoil it for everybody. I'm real bad on spoilers. And if you want, we can talk in cryptic riddles for the first part, and then for the last half hour, you want to do all spoiler editions. We can talk about whatever you want. That's actually not a bad idea, because I do sense It's like, yeah, I've got this book and things happen to these people, and I don't want to say anything, but but if you want to do a whole, all hands barred, let's just give a spoiler alert and then go for it. Whenever you want to do that.
Well, it could be fun. Before we do that, so what about? I mean, we kind of talked about this earlier, but you were getting like real people into the book, and as not a student of history as much as you are, I probably missed a few, but a couple that I know I caught on was Porter. Like as soon as Porter Rockwell I got in my book, I was like, I had to chat with you because I know you're doing that series with Bryce, and you have your book about Mormonism. So clearly, you didn't include Joseph Smith, which was maybe disappointing, but the fact that you included one of his top lieutenants, and then was it Hypatia
of Alexandria.
Who was from like Alexandria, the famous library, including her as a character. That was what was it like to say, okay, these are real people, I want to include them in the book, and do the best I can to show off their character.
Hypatia was one of those early on we knew we wanted to have, because we knew we wanted to have them saving the Library of Alexandria as part of the overarching theme of the story. The funny thing about that was, have you ever seen the movie Agora?
I haven't, because that was about that time period, right?
It's about Hypatia, and I kind of have a love-hate with the movie because they take a lot of liberties with the story in several ways, but the things they get right, they get so well right. The look of 4th century, 5th century Alexandria is amazing, and it's a real you are there feel to it. Even though there's some quibbles about Roman armor, what the soldiers would have looked like then, but the layout of the city and the feel of the city and the feel of all these religious torment going on between the pagans and the Christians and the Jews, they did an amazing job. So I knew, she's always been one of my favorite characters of history anyway. But the funny thing was, the more research we did on Alexandria, the more I realized, there wasn't ever really one single Library of Alexandria. And it didn't just go away at one time. So all these simplistic ideas I had about, the myth of the Library of Alexandria, we kind of had to fine tune it, and it became more saving the whole city, which, still worked. But it's interesting how your scope of something changes when you do more research. And there's lots of things that we discarded because the research didn't pan out. So, it was quite a labor of love, this book, and we took very few liberties with the history. I think the only one I can really think of is we made it easier for them to get from one part of ancient Egypt back to the Nile than it would have been in real life, because otherwise it would have been, just wasted time from a story standpoint. But for the most part, the history's pretty accurate. The language is pretty accurate. The facts that get, that they live through are pretty much how it would have been. And I think that's going across the board for all the places we went to.
Did you know Porter Rockwell would be in there initially?
No, I didn't actually. But he's such a fun character. I think early Mormon history is so chock full of these scoundrels, but he's like in a class of himself by himself, because he was like a Mormon gunslinger outlaw / hero to Joseph Smith. And it's just the thought of taking him and, okay, you're cut off, you're on your own, there's no Joseph Smith, no Mormon church, it's just you, and what a monster he could be on his own, I think comes off pretty well in the book.
Although, I mean, when he comes in the book, this is in his own timeline, like, I guess, post Joseph Smith dying. Oh, no, it might be.
Yeah. We catch up to him, or he has a flashback to right after Joseph Smith was killed. And again, all the characters in the book, we start them out by they're in their own time. And then one day this thing called the event comes, shatters the timeline. So when we catch up to all our characters, it could be in any part of their life, it just we get a snapshot of each and every one of them, and that's where they enter the story, is at the arbitrarily picked times. Yeah. So, for instance, Hypatia comes to the story before any of the horrible, tragic things happen to her, and Nellie, one of our other characters, knows all those horrible things are going to happen to her, and she has a chance to change history. That part of history,
Well, let's do the spoiler thing. So the 31-minute time.
Yeah. And again,
if you haven't read the books, please come back to this later.
Yeah.
Warning. You really should read these books because they're really good. They're
super fun.
I'd say they're fast paced, but they're not like, you're not going to forget it. They're going to be details. They're going to stick with you for time. Like, there are going to be characters, going to be moments. There are going to be moments where you're going to be like, hey, wait a second. Let's start with the biggest spoiler first. So the whole big kit and caboodle was about them basically reversing this event.
Right. That's
making
their whole quest is they want to save the world before it destroys it. And so they have to go back to the place, the lab in Antarctica.
Back to the future. Sorry, wrong book.
Yeah, exactly. Back to
wrong.
The future. But
they have to go back to the event that happens.
Yeah. And
so what did you have that the way it goes in the book?
Yeah.
Where things kind of, world is saved, but then
they continue. Yes, they're going through the whole book. And again,
was that what you wanted to?
Major spoilers, folks. So if you haven't read the books, don't stop listening. No. But
if you're listening this far,
they go through the whole trilogy thinking, because they've been told that if they just do this, we can make it as if the event never happened and restore the world in the timeline as it was. So they go through many problems and obstacles, and through these time and space twists at the end. And they could have. There was a chance for them to have done that. But as it happens, what happens is they manage to save the world from being destroyed, but it's still the Time Shards world. They don't restore the world to where it was. They just keep this new jigsaw planet of a world intact. So history, it starts again. It's a new year zero, and now it's a new world where it's made up of pieces from all these past, present, and future all over the world.
Well, with that in mind, did you do that in a way because maybe you wanted to continue living in this universe? Like, you feel, I am not sure if I'm done with this.
There's
exactly so many like directions exactly we can go with it. Like,
yeah. Well, I like the idea of them having this goal, and at the end succeeding, or not succeed, but thinking they failed, but they haven't quite failed. It hasn't been a total failure. It's just a little different. It's a different ending than they expected. But for instance, Kahotep realizes, our Egyptian character, that the reason that he's had 8 years of his life in America with Layla is that it was because he saved the world 8 years ago, his time. Where I realize how confusing this is, even just describing it to ourselves. But yeah, there's a twist. Why am I worried about spoilers? No one does understand what the hell
we're in the post-spoiler world now. You can say anything. This part is from 30 minutes, 30 seconds on, is for people who have read the books.
So. That's right. Well, what I love at the ending is that he realizes that he actually is the one who saved the world 8 years prior, just by being where he is now, to make that difference. And he winds up not saving the world from the event, but saving the post-event world. And
so everything Hotep does, he does knowing that what he does is going to ultimately lead to him saving the world that he lives in.
Well, see, what happens
because when he becomes kind of like, oh no, he's going to be the bad guy, he's going to keep the people from solving their problem.
Exactly.
Then it became like, well, actually, he kind of knew it was going to happen, but he had to do what he did to make sure that his world.
Here's the thing, though. He didn't know he was going to save the world. He assumed that Amber and those guys saved the world, did somehow 8 years ago, and that they had to keep these guys from fucking up their world. Because if they, when they get separated and reunited, Blake and Cam and Professor Harcourt, they're now in America in 8 years in their own future, which Kohotep and Layla lived through this whole time for those 8 years, and they built up this empire on the Mississippi. And we see a lot of what's happened to North America after the event through their eyes. They don't know what stopped the aftershocks from destroying the planet. They just know that 8 years ago it did stop. And these guys are going to go back in time, and if they stop everything, then everything they've done will be wrecked. They'll lose their children. They'll lose everything they've done. And that early on in the story, originally, it wasn't going to be Kohotep who was that bad guy. I was going to do some like beloved American figure like Benjamin Franklin. He was going to be my bad guy originally. And there was going to be, some post-event society that he'd created. And so, because I wanted it to be this competing timeline. It's like, these aren't bad guys, they're not people, but you can't both exist. So it's like one of you has to go.
One has to win.
One has to win and one has to lose. And you're a good guy and you're a good guy, and pitting them against each other. But at some point during one of our walks on the beach, we realized, we don't have to create that, bring Benjamin Franklin into. We can have our own guys do that because of, the ins and outs of what happens when they go to Antarctica. And basically what happens is there's a thing called the shatter field, and it's like the endosphere around a black hole. It's where time and space are breaking down, and it's a spot where it's like if you take all these timelines in a bundle like a rope, that's where all the frayed edges are. And so when they're in Escher space, that's where the frayed edges are. The shatter field is sort of the outer part of that, where it's all these bits of space-time, and as you know, when you hit one, boom, you're no longer. It's a what do you call it? Not an Einstein-Rosen bridge, but it's a connection to another time and space, and it forms a wormhole of sorts.
I think when that happened initially, because that's in like book 3, but
that's in book 3, and the whole
when they fall into these, I'm like, they're right. The beginning of the book, they're like, we're here, we're where we're gonna stop, and then they fall and fix it all, and then they fall into this thing, and I'm like, oh come on, you're just creating this thing to like delay till the end, and then it's like, oh, we're going into this whole different world.
Yeah,
that was the point.
It's not padding the book. It is the book. Yeah.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there are tricks of the trade, but at the same time, when they're done well, then you're just like, hey, I can see them.
I hope so.
I can see I can see what he's doing, but let me follow. Oh wow. Okay. Never mind. I'm in. Yeah. I'm with you. I'm good.
I mean, on the one hand, it was an opportunity to send us to more places, so we had more places in the world we hadn't seen yet. And see more stuff that I wanted to bring along from the beginning, like Cahokia. Cahokia is something I always wanted to do. Northern Japan, the Ainu people, that was something I knew I wanted to have in the book, and it was
that
super
part
fun.
I wasn't totally sure where you were, because that part when you were in the different versions of like St. Louis, Missouri, and you had the what is it, the arch, and then the gangsters and the kind of Porter Rockwell era 19th century version, just all living together. And in a way I was like, wait a second, these people have created this whole society. Your video disappeared. I may have lost him. No shit. Well, That was fun. He actually went into a wormhole, everybody. The first time a character's ever gone into a wormhole in show history. Oh, wait, he's back. Except your audio is gone. I can't hear you. Oh, you just, yeah, your mute button popped off, but I still can't hear you. Apparently you've been in St. Louis for the last 8 years. Is that what happened? Oh, shit. Thing is, you look good. But the audio part is not happening. It's weird. There's something, happening on the audio on your side. You just talk really slow. I can see your words, then we can continue the interview. That's weird. I don't know what happened. I assume a cat was involved. Anyway, for those of you in the future checking this out on the, it's weird because it does the mute thing and then it pops off. So I don't know. Maybe you need to click on the link again to get back in the room. Like leave and come back. See if you can try that. This is live radio, everybody. This is what happens. I didn't really have the plan of doing the spoiler version, but you know what? You should check out the books and then get back with me and see if I came up with the right questions. And let's see if he comes back. If he doesn't, then we'll have to do some kind of cliffhanger. And clearly, I need to make sure that I talk to this guy more often than every 4 years because he's a boss, And one thing we've learned over the past 4 years is the people who are good in this community really stick with them. And I think he's back.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yay! Okay. I'll just have to remember that. If that happens again, we'll just go back to the wormhole. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, gosh. I don't even know. We were talking about
we were talking about all the different places we went to in book 3. And so when they're in northern Japan.
No, wait, it was Nellie and Hypatia.
Nellie and Hypatia.
Who went to Japan.
Yeah, and I'm really glad.
I knew it was like a distant time in the past, but I didn't know where they were. You kind of explained it later, which, you know what, that was one of those things I had to like ask, because at the beginning of the third book, you have like the kind of characters fighting each other through like mind powers, almost like a Marvel kind of movie thing.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, "What's going on?" Oh, she'll explain it eventually. You had earned my trust, so I knew it would come.
I'm glad
eventually.
You stuck with it. Yeah, because the third future, we had the good future, the horrible future, and then we have the psychic wars future, which kind of has a medieval feel about it, really, because the whole world's shattered into all these psychic factions, and that was fun to write too. And of course, we find out all these futures are kind of anchored on this character called Dr. Meta, Jonathan Meta, and he's kind of the link through all these different timelines. Something in every single timeline that there's something happens because somebody's jinking around with time and space, and it all happens in all these timelines in the 23rd century around this dude, and different incarnations of him.
In just in every kind of fiction, you have people like messing with that, and it always goes badly.
Yeah.
Like, will it ever go well? And I do have to ask, this might get cut out later, but like did you think Hemet Meta is the ultimate character?
No, in fact, I think I sent
because the name came up. There are different versions, but I was like, wait a second.
I think I've sent him an email saying, "Hey, dude." So there's a good guy. It's not even the bad guy. There's a good guy, a bad guy, and another good guy, and they're all named Meta.
He is all things.
Yeah. Had nothing to do with Hemet. Love Hemet. Yeah. But yeah, the bad guy has nothing to do with Hemet Meta. Yeah. I like the name Meta. It has a nice Greek resonance about it, and it's kind of like a Doctor Who name. It's got that little enigmatic air about it. And I wanted a name that could be adapted in many different ways. So it had to be a name like John.
It was,
yeah, that we could play around with different versions of. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, in this kind of book, you probably have to keep it PG for the most part, but you did kind of get to an actual, real the relationship between Nellie and Hypatia, or
Yeah.
Hypatia. I should. You can pronounce names better than I can.
No, you got it right, Hypatia. Yeah.
What was it like getting characters who are from, I don't know, what was it, 1,500 years apart from each other? I don't even know what the time was to actually connect, and obviously they can speak each other's language because of the AI. That's a nice thing you can throw in there, and then it disappears and comes back as you need it, which is good. But the fact that they were able to kind of, admit they were kind of interested. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, Hypatia, she was like famously asexual. She never got married. Never, as far as I know, she wasn't a lesbian. And she did. We do have a story about her rebuffing the advances of one of her students that I almost put into the book, but it seemed overkill at that point. But if anything, she was probably asexual. Whereas Nellie Bly, the reporter, when I've read her memoirs of that round the world trip she took and other writings she did, because we did a lot of writing to get her voice down. She really seems to like girls a lot. And for instance, when she met Jules Verne, it's so obvious her and Jules Verne's wife were totally smitten. She's definitely smitten with the wife, and it seems like the wife really loved her too, even though they had no language in common. She didn't speak English, she didn't speak French, but they seemed to really click at their one meeting. And just the way she talks about girls and women, just matter-of-factly, in her writings, made me think, wow, she really notices when a girl's pretty and things like that. And there's a joke that Nellie says at some point in book 3. Is like, well, I suppose I could be persuaded to marry a rich millionaire with health problems. And that's exactly what she did in real life. Yeah. So it wasn't a stretch at all to put Nellie in that situation. And it was plausible enough with Hypatia to do it. And I love the way that whole relationship plays out. I love how they don't even have words for that, basically. And it's not cool in either of their cultures, really. But it comes together. And I don't know. I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. It's really pretty. I really liked how that went. Same thing with Kotep and Layla.
Kotep is from
ancient Egypt.
I don't remember the time, but then it's like a woman from I think 1990 Egypt. I think.
Yeah, she's a girl from 1990 Egypt and a man from the Ramses dynasty. So that's believe 1500 BC. I want to say. So he's by far the oldest character that way, as far the most ancient character we have. Yeah, hi.
I know. Don't ignore the cats.
I know. I've got 10 cats and a dog around here, and so
cats. Wait a second. Wow.
Oh, yes. Here's one. Here's one. Here's a cat. Other people. Yeah. We're down to 10 cats, I should say. Hey, Pogine, go get your mother. Go get your mother.
I think there was it was a time travel kind of book. And it had a battle between Alexander's army and like Genghis Khan in the end. It was like two different times getting together. I can't remember which book that was. But so what made you think, hey, how about war elephants versus a Nazi tank regiment? How about that?
That, I tell you, just getting the facts right of like the battle for El Alamein in World War II. Getting what kind of firepower they would have and their the weaknesses and strengths they would have, and it's like, what do you do if you're a 5th century Egyptian city? How can they fight against these guys? And that took a lot of thought, and I hope the people who are into military science fiction and military history, I hope they appreciate everything that went into that battle scene, both the recreations of El Alamein and the battle for Alexandria in the book. A lot of loving work went into that, and it's like, okay, well, you can't face them this way, you're gonna have to do this way, but these are tanks, and tanks have strengths and weaknesses, and I thought we did a really good job of playing off each other, the advantages that the Alexandrians had and the advantages that the Germans have, and their weaknesses. I'm doing that coy thing where I don't want to give away too much, but I'm really pleased with how that battle played out.
So you're living in multiple timelines, one where you're not doing spoilers and when you are.
Exactly.
You're already there. I mean, that was kind of a question I wrote when I was like, we're not going to do spoilers. But the fact, it's like a peanut butter and chocolate. You're combining things in interesting ways where it's like, it doesn't look like this one side has a chance, but if, on the side of the Alexandria, like Blake was there and he was in World War II, he was actually I think he was in that battle, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
Before he gets pulled out because of the event. Yeah. So he's kind of met with them. You had Rommel in there, but he wasn't in there too much. And
it was funny because he's kind of a sympathetic character in the book, actually. And originally he was even more sympathetic. I was going to leave him in charge of Alexandria when they left to save the world. But then as I was doing research on the characters, it's like, Rommel might have been an okay guy for a Nazi, but he's not that great a guy. And it's like, after World War II, they sort of kind of not sanctified him exactly, but they kind of used the myth of Rommel as the good German who resisted Hitler. And by far, by Nazi standards, he was a good guy, and he did resist Hitler. But, he just wasn't quite good enough to me to redeem him completely. So, but I did enjoy having him in there, and he's such a strong figure. And then to have our bad guy come and just take him out like that was a fun chapter to write.
What happened to the meta guy in that timeline? I can't remember. Because he did the mind control on Rommel.
Yeah, he did the mind
over the German thing
on Rommel. He sends the German army after Alexandria to take over Alexandria, and so we've got good Merlin, who's dead by then, evil Merlin, and psychic Merlin. Psychic Merlin takes him out with this psionic blast that was what he learned from when he, in his origin story, when Sinsamaya destroys that psychic army that's marching, psychic zombies that are marching into Cairo. So that takes out all the metas by that point.
Like psychic zombies sounds like a school board meeting in the South. Oh boy, that's not getting to reality. It's more depressing than the post-apocalyptic whatever. So I mean, since we had the Expanse, we have I think the Wheel of Time, we have like a bunch of these kind of big budget TV series coming out. Can this be some initially I think last time you were on, it was like, a movie based on your books, but it's like clearly what you've done could be like 3 series of a Apple TV show, like 10 episodes each one. And because you can't cut it off. It's got to be like Game of Thrones. It's got to breathe.
Right.
It could be different.
It could be different.
You executive producer, you'd be like, cool, make changes. I'm cool.
But
I could live in San Francisco now. I can afford it. Yeah,
exactly. That kind of It would be fun if they made something like a series out of it, or even graphic novels, or TV shows would be awesome. And in fact, I don't want to jinx it, but I know at least it is being shopped around by at least 2 people who have connections to producers. So fingers crossed, but I mean, it's just a crapshoot. It's not even a part of my reality now, but that would be awesome. That would be super awesome.
I know being like connected with the literary world, it's like you can like have people interested in the rights, and you can even sell the rights, but then it doesn't always turn into something.
Yeah. Guillermo del Toro, the director, has a great quote about it. It says, in your average lifespan of a movie, it never gets made. That's the average movie. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
There's a great.
I
was going to say there's a great show on Netflix now called The Movies That Made Us, where it takes a look behind the scenes at movies like Back to the Future and Forrest Gump and Pretty Woman and all these other movies, and you see what was going on while they were making these movies. And it's like, how did Die Hard and Back to the Future, the changes that happened, the curveballs that they got hit with. It's like, how did this movie ever get made as well as it did? Because it looks flawless, it looks perfect, and then you see how just by the seat of the pants some of the stuff that happens is it's very funny.
Was like with Back to the Future, it was like they had a different actor initially,
right?
Because Michael J. Fox was on TV, and then they had Michael J. Fox doing the movie at night and doing a TV show during the day.
Yes. How did that?
And initially, it was a refrigerator he traveled through time, and then it became
an atomic
car.
Yeah.
Well, the old atomic bomb was one of the. But it's just sometimes you see these stories of like how movies came together, and it's like the initial screenplay would have been a disaster, and then these 3 changes and the fact that they got a certain actor really made it work.
It does so well.
Of course.
Hey, we've got a special guest that just walked in the door. Should I bring over Dana? She just came from work. She's exhausted. She's been working at the museum all day. They're moving their whole collection to up and down flights of stairs. Do you want to talk about Time Shards at all? Maybe. We'll see if we we'll revisit that.
we'll work up to it. But what's coming next? I think you were talking about like a sex and violence in the Bible book. Like, what is it? The History of Western Religion series. What's it called again?
It's the Complete Heretic's Guide to Western Religion. That's exactly it.
And you said complete, so you have.
Well, I mean,
you have to get the completion, right?
The Complete Heretics, not.
Oh, okay. Because I was like, you have a lot of books you've conceived of for the series.
I do have a Jehovah's Witness book in the works afterwards.
Oh, but, you talked about that one.
Mormons is a tough act to follow, to be honest with you. I mean, there's so much history and wild craziness in that. The podcast I did for Myth Vision with Bryce Blankenagel of Naked Mormonism, we thought we'd do, it's probably eight episodes, maybe 4 episodes, maybe 10 episodes, and we just wrapped up episode 29 or something, and when we finally got to a good place to stop, and we're still not quite done with it.
I mean, Bryce has been doing Naked Mormonism for years, and I think he's past Joseph Smith dying, but he has so much theoretical. It could be like generations for him to get through it all.
He is just an encyclopedia Mormonica.
Like with you and him, your history, like you both are just like, you're in this shit. Like you just listening to you two have a conversation about something that Porter Rockwell said to Joseph Smith in like 1846 random year, probably bad history. But you could probably talk for 2 days about just that.
Yeah, and
there's just
constantly
so much.
We're saying that during the podcast. It's like, we are just we've been talking for 2 hours now. We could be talking about this all month long. These things that happen. We were just going from the best bits to the best bits.
I mean, it's like, imagine, as someone, you've written all these Jesus books.
Yeah.
Imagine having like the historical record that you have for Mormonism, for Christianity.
Absolutely.
You would have all kinds of stories and all kinds of characters.
Yeah. And we wouldn't recognize it as.
And there would be things that you wouldn't know about, that you probably couldn't know about. But even because of the timeline, it's amazing. And it's probably hard to distill even one episode, because I saw a couple of those that you were doing, and I was like, oh boy, you guys starting a series. Can you finish it? It's going to be a tough one.
But I gotta say, that was a super fun series, and if you are interested in Mormonism, that's
so you finished, you guys. You're sure you're done?
No, I'm not sure, but we kind of we've got other things we have to be doing now, and so but we know. I know we have like 2 or 3 other episodes that we said we would do at some point. We just have to get around to it again. But like a Q&A episode, and we were talking about maybe doing a debate about a thing called the Spalding theory, about where the Book of Mormon came from. Did it come from this particular set of circumstances? And So yeah, there's still plenty we can talk about. I don't know if you saw on Netflix that show Murder Among the Mormons. It's a
I did see it. I remember when it came out, I was like, "Hey, Bryce, look at this thing!" And
it's awesome. It's awesome. I knew the entire story front to back, and I was still on the edge of my seat. They did such a good job. The director is the same guy who did Napoleon Dynamite. So he's really is a great filmmaker. And
I mean, what I liked about it was that it was just like 3 episodes, because sometimes these real reality things can go and get a little bit stretched.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, 3 was just the perfect amount. And in fact, if anything, I think they were a little too easy on the Mormon Church, because
sure, yeah.
they're I mean, I talk about that in my book on the Mormons, and the way they lay it out, it's like, I'm surprised the Mormon Church still exists at all after that. But then again, look at the Catholic Church. I was surprised they just weren't done after that. Yeah.
This has been brought up so many times.
Yeah.
And I feel like you and Bryce would be great executive producers for this kind of thing. Like an HBO Game of Thrones style show about the creation of the Mormon Church.
It would be so awesome.
Would be amazing. Would the church be like, would you be dead? Basically, because
we would be dead.
Yeah. The real story.
So much sex, so much violence.
Like, people don't know that kind of stuff.
They really don't.
Talk to some ex-Mormons. It's like the people who are still in are like, I have no idea what this is. The people who are out are like, wow. Like, this guy was arrested for fraud before he did the exact same thing to create a religion. It's like, interesting.
And there was this whole rogues gallery around him. It wasn't even just him. It wasn't just Brigham. There was a whole slew of guys that were just, predators on this Mormon community. And there still are. That's the thing that kills me. Is like, even now, today, Utah is like the leading fraud capital of America. And a lot of it is Mormon on Mormon fraud. It's like, blows my mind. Blows my mind.
Well, it's like that weird Hobby Lobby, Bible Museum, where they bought all these documents. It turned out they were like fraudulent.
Yeah.
It's like, this is the real Bible. And it's like, oh, no, it's not.
Oh, it's not. Yeah. And like a major.
That's a good industry. Maybe that's something you and Bryce should be doing. Creating.
Yeah.
I don't know. The guy who was creating those documents was also building bombs. So don't learn that stuff too.
Yeah. I was going to say, that's what keeps him from being like the greatest hero of all time, is that, and then he murdered people. Yeah. But yeah, what a magnificent bastard he was while he was going, in the beginning. He was just playing the Mormon leadership like a fiddle, and they were happy to shell out the money. I don't know if this came up. I don't think it came up in the show, but remember at the end, there was this thing called the McClellan Collection. And when he realized it, he said, "Oh yeah, I've got the McClellan Collection. I'll give it to you." And then he realized, "Oh wait, the McClellan Collection is like, an orange crate full of different stuff. There's no way he'd be able to forge it all." That's when his whole scheme fell apart. When he realized he couldn't hand over the McClellan Collection. Well, the irony of that, and again, I don't think it came out in the show, but like 6 months after this whole thing wrapped up, and after his trial, the Mormon Church found the McClellan Collection buried in their own archives. They'd had it since like 1911. And they'd buried it so deep that they forgot that they had it. And so they were paying, more than $250,000 to this guy for something they had already buried in their collection. Blows my mind. Blows my mind.
So is there like a place somewhere where you could access like all the original like Mormon documents that you probably couldn't get access to, like you and
I could not? But yeah, there absolutely is. They talk about the Vatican Library. Yeah, the Mormon archives. Who knows what else they have in there? Because if they saw anything that they thought would expose their church as being bullshit, they would snap it right up and put it away. And what I loved about the whole Hoffman affair is that in the beginning, he would find these things, he would sell them, they would hush them up, and then he would leak it to the press, so they'd have to pull it out again and admit that they had it. you just can't make this kind of
Did
stuff
you
up.
ever read the Expanse books, just out of curiosity?
I started watching the show and I wanted to read the books. I haven't had a chance to yet, but it looks like a very, very cool series from all reports.
Because there's a ship that during the books in the show that is the Mormons create, and it's to be the first ship to travel to different stars. And it's like we're gonna create whatever is it. Each person gets their own sun. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Clearly, they jumped over everyone else. So what's next from the amazing mind of David Fitzgerald? So you're doing the Sex and Violence in the Bible book? Is that
Bible? And that's going to be super fun. But there's some interesting things that have come up very recently, and I should mention that real fast. I did a talk for the Global Center for Religious Research at their Historical Jesus conference, and then I did a follow-up talk for Recovering from Religion, and both of them focused on they focused on the chapter that I contributed to John Loftus and Robert Price's book that's coming out, if not this year, next year, on the varieties of mythicism. So watch out for that. But the chapter that I submitted was why mythicism matters. And the part I focused on for the talks is that it's not just Jesus and it's not just Christianity that has this problem with their founder figures having this biography that's really dodgy. And I mentioned that when I wrote the book Nailed and Jesus Mything in Action, that one of the most surprising developments of that is when I had ex-Muslims and Buddhists come up to me and say, yeah, we're having those same discussions in our circles, whether the Buddha really existed or whether Muhammad really existed. And it's like, that blew my mind right there. Because Muhammad, we've got his family tree, we've got his genealogy, and then I started realizing, oh wait, we have that for Jesus too. Yeah, wait a second. And when they're describing these things seem to predate Islam, and these things that were supposedly happening when Muhammad was around actually happened 90 years later for the first time. And there's even more evidence than that, to the point where now I think, oh wow, I guess Muhammad didn't exist. And the Buddha, that wasn't so much of a stretch. But from that point, I started doing some research on all the major religions, all the top 10. And I was talking to a friend of mine who was a Sikh. And because Sikhism is only about 500 years old. It happened, America is older than Sikhism. But when you look through the history of Sikhism, that starts with these 10 gurus. Well, it's not until we get to like halfway through that list that we actually get the Sikh scriptures written. And all the stories that happen from the founder figure are like him having discussions with a fish and him doing this miraculous thing here. And it's like, it's all seems to be mythological, and it's mythological stories that were invented themselves a generation or two or three after his death. So it blew my mind that even these recent religions that I just assumed were totally historically grounded, they also seem to have a mythological founder figure. And this is happening for all the major religions down the board. Sure, there was a Joseph Smith, but the Angel Moroni and the Prophet Mormon who wrote the book, those guys are fake. Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard existed, but Xenu didn't exist. It's mind blowing to me that when you go down the line of the top 10 religions and a couple more like the Baha'is and the Mormons, you see this exact same pattern. I'm planning on doing some kind of talk, or not a talk, sorry, but a article maybe with Valerie Terrico about that, because that just blows my mind. Anyway, I feel like I'm off on a rabbit trail.
I'm a little scared. I'm like, what is the religion going to look like in 200 years that's created around the cult of Trump?
Right. And
because there's going to be I still I'm like, it kind of makes sense, the Jesus and like Muhammad thing, because it's like, Trump is like this objectively terrible human, but the way people talk about him is like he is this deity, and it's like, This person doesn't really need to have any good background to be deified by people.
Yeah. And you look at QAnon.
Like, what? But
the QAnon cult is complete bullshit. It's complete bullshit from a non-existing person invented by some guys.
It's funny because the last time you were on, we talked about like the Q. That was like a big thing that Bart Ehrman taught, and lots of Jesus historians talk about this Q document, which is supposedly this document that existed before the Gospels, I think, or maybe at the same time as the Gospels. But there's no actual proof that it really existed, and maybe someone will find it someday. But it's like this. Everybody's like, well, if this exists, then this explains this. I'm like, well, can you show that this exists first? No, we can't. Okay.
Right.
But it's like, and then now everybody says Q, and sadly it's connected with, one of the crazier House representatives is only from like 20 miles north of where I am, Marjorie Taylor Greene. She doesn't even live there, and she's like a CrossFit leader, and it's just like, oh, I can do this to be. It's gonna be a rough time for a lot of people.
Seriously, the Republican Party's going so off the rails and taking the country with it. I'm just terrified. Where what's happened.
They're not afraid. Like they have this. They're going the way they're going, and there's got to be a version of this on the Democratic side where they're just like, we're still playing by rules that the other side has been playing with in 50 years.
Well, they're fact proof. They are science proof. It's like, and this plays back on something I was saying way long ago, like at least 10 years ago, saying that the good news is that Christianity is shrinking, but the bad news is it's shrinking from the smartest and most rational down to they're the ones leaving. So what's left is the nutty, crunchy core of fundies who are uneducated and proud of it and fact proof.
Yeah, it's this weird thing where people are like, I don't trust, that the vaccine for the coronavirus has been properly scientifically checked, but I will check this discredited biologist who's saying take ivermectin, which, hey, if you have worms, that humans do actually use that. It's not necessarily a horse medicine. The problem is the people who take it are taking horse amounts, and they're getting sick. And then you're seeing like
doesn't solve the problem.
You see mainstream people. It was like, well, there was one study. It's like, yeah, one study, and then later it was discredited. It's like, you do this stuff all the time. You're probably like, oh, there was someone who said there was this book that was, Jesus did this thing, and then you look into it and you're like, no.
The fact that we have people using satellite internet to espouse the flat Earth, that blows my mind. Blows my mind. That shows how bad things have gone awry, and that's scary to me. That's what I think religion's morphing into. It's like we fell for this, now we're falling for this, and I'm really curious to see how the 21st century plays out with this.
The understanding that skepticism can be situational. Sometimes you just aren't.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm not skeptic when I'm rooting for a sports team, but that's okay because that's not going to like kill me if something goes badly.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, I got the vaccine, but I'm living in a state where, I don't know, 48% of people are not. So I mean, I live in a city where it's probably a little better, but I don't know. Even California has pockets of, Republicanism.
Absolutely.
They have a weird state where it's like the Democrats are so in power that sometimes they don't always do progressive things, I mean, I don't know how well they've done with the homeless situation, and I don't know who can do a good job with all the natural disasters you're having, like the fires. I mean,
tough. It is tough. It is tough. But by far the biggest thing facing us is COVID. I mean, it's kind of trumping all of them right now. Hey, baby, you want to come talk about Time Shards at all? No, you don't have to. You don't have to.
He's done a good job.
Say hi to the people.
Are the true brains behind the whole Time Shards?
I'm the brains behind whenever anyone dies horribly. That's me.
Simon, the guy in book 1, him being okay. Spoiler alert! Remember, we're doing spoilers.
We're past
now.
that.
Oh, we
Yeah.
are?
Yeah.
Wow.
Him being a serial killer was all her. That was her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You'll have to excuse me. I am, for the last 4 days, I've been going up and down flights of stairs, like 75 flights, 55 flights, moving stuff in a museum to prepare for renovations. And I'm fried.
I bet you are.
Yeah.
So clearly it must have worked out, because the thought of like two people in a relationship writing a book together, for some people it's probably like going to be a guaranteed end, but it seems like it's brought you closer together. So
yeah, it was mostly fun. Yes.
Yeah, we had a few moments, but it's just.
I went into it much more scared than it played out to be. It worked out so much better than I thought.
Don't be frightened, baby. Don't be scared. It's okay. Oh, yes.
We had some good knockdown dragouts, and when you bring your editor in, that's a whole different thing too. But all in all, it worked really well.
I've collaborated with a lot of different people, and I'm pretty good at it. And I don't dig my heels in unless I really feel there's a reason to dig my heels in. So. You're very lucky to be married to me.
I
and
am.
Have me as a writing.
That is very true.
Yes, you are.
So what's the next trilogy you're working on, the two of you?
Well, she's got some
sleep.
Yeah.
Trilogy of sleep.
She just finished the third book in her Lilith series.
And I just got the edits back from my editor. So I'm finishing that up. And then we'll see.
Yeah. Well, she has a Zombocalypse series, Plague Town, Plague Nation, Plague World. Which was super fun. If you like, it's a Buffy meets the Walking Dead was the log line for it, and her Spawn of Lilith series is, stunt woman by day, demon hunter by night.
So it's not really divided by the time of day. It's just
the character
based on reality.
She drew a lot on her own experiences in Hollywood, so there's lots of good. It's a fun series too. These are all fun series.
Yeah.
And when do you know as a couple you have enough cats?
Let's grab a couple of cats. Well, here's the thing. What happens is, we did foster,
we just have two,
and we'd like, okay, we can't have any more cats. And then it's like, oh, but this cat is so adorable. So I was like, okay, but this one more, and then no more cats. So then you get ridiculous floofs like this punk butt here. I mean, how do you say no to that? Can you bring him up to the camera? Bring him up to the camera. How do you say no to that? No, you are ridiculous. You're ridiculous.
Like
so we have 10 of the
paws.
most ridiculously adorable cats ever. And some of them push the envelope between how rotten can I be and still be loved, Looking at you, Shug.
Yeah.
You inappropriate.
That's every cat.
Yeah, that's every cat. And Khaleesi, our Siamese.
That's my Horcrux.
That's her Horcrux, yeah. And Pogue. Hey, Pogine, you want to say hi? You want to say hi to the people? Come here. Let's see hi. See if we can do this without losing everything. There's Pogue.
That's my butt.
Yep. I don't want to touch anything because I'll lose our sound.
How many of those cats get in the bed every night, or is it you kick them out?
We do both. We kick them, but there's usually it's not unusual to have 5 or 6 cats to kick out.
To be covered by 10 cats.
I mean, seriously.
I'm sorry, so I'm so tired.
That sounded better. I had to say
well,
that.
Thank you, Dana, for joining us. So
you're welcome. Can I go now?
Sure.
Bye.
Thanks,
in conclusion, where can people track it down? I'll include all the links to your books, wife's books, awesome. Every book ever written, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that would be great. And this has been super fun.
And then the was it GCCR? I can't remember the initials. I found the talk you did for the Jesus mythicism thing.
Yeah.
And I think you pay. It's cool because you did the talk. I remember it was coming up because I saw you on Facebook, and it was like, oh, you pay $5, you can basically access them all for like a month. And I'm like, cool. So I did that so I could check your stuff out. And then some of the other people who talked for that, because I know it's tough because conferences used to be show up in person, and now it's show up online, and
it's a different world. Yeah,
may the cats trot where they may.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about the cats at this point. It's their house. We just live in it. Yeah.
Okay, so people can find you going to David Fitzgerald on Facebook, but we're
Call me on Facebook. There's also davidfitzgerald.org website that I'm trying to add more info to. And you can always shoot me an email at everybodylovesdave@gmail.com.
Does everyone love? They should.
They should, right? Yeah.
Okay, well, sounds great. Well, thanks for being on again, and we'll do this more often than every 4 years, and because you've already written like 5 more books by then.
We'll see. I definitely want to talk after we do the sex and violence book. That's going to be super fun.
Oh, sounds good.
Fun.
Well,
all right,
let's
Zach.
do it.
Thanks again.
All right. Thanks for being on.
Take care.
Keep hitting the